My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to answer the question, has the lockdown from the pandemic increased the learning gap between the rich and the poor? And if it has, I want to know why. And if it has, what can be done to fix this problem? Now, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm also a clinical supervisor. And at the agency that I work at, we were discussing this issue. It's very important because the agency that I work for, we work with Medicaid clients, which they're part of the lower socioeconomic group. So of course the lockdown should or probably affect them the most, especially according to the studies that we've looked at. But as I looked into these numbers a little bit more, it's not enough just to say that there is a problem. We have to try to figure out ways to fix the problem, because we can't just give people a bunch of money. That's not going to help. So the lower socioeconomic groups, I can't change that in the present time. So we have to learn how to deal with it during the pandemic. Now I know as I'm recording this is starting to change a little bit. Children are starting to go back to school. But from what I've read, the children from the lower socioeconomic groups are way, way behind. And now it's going to take them that much more to catch up to the people in the middle class or the higher middle class, or even the richer groups. So the major argument here to say that there is a learning gap, or the reason why, is because the lockdown has caused unequal learning opportunities for the poor. So we have to look into that. We can't just say it. Is it true? And the numbers that we look at seem to point to that it is true. So here's a few. 58% of the students don't have access to their own study space. Number two, 14% do not have access to a computer. Number three, 9% do not have access to the internet. And number four, there is no money for tutors or individualized instruction. So let's take that as fact for now of what we see. And that does cause a gap between the rich and the poor, absolutely. But let's take a look at it a little bit more. So number one, 58% don't have access to their own study space. Well, just by the fact that it's 58%, that means that there's a lot of middle class people as well that are not necessarily on the poor end of the scale, who don't have their own study space. So there are people who can do well without having their own study space. The other part to that is they never had that space before. They didn't have it before the lockdown. So this is a problem that's, if it's a problem, has always been a problem. The lockdown did not cause it, so it really, in a sense, should not be on this list. Now, here's another one I want to add to that. Now, I want to give you a personal story. So I was talking to a couple of people throughout the last few weeks, and they told me, they said, you should leave out the personal stuff. And I've got a thought about that. Number one, I don't want to do a show or any type of artwork or information that has me in it, that I'm just reading a Wikipedia page. Anybody can do that. I'd rather draw emotional blood and actually have some experiences so people can understand the data along with actual anecdotal evidence or actual human experience. So let me tell you this. The first apartment I lived in with my mother and my sister, it was a one-bedroom apartment. Now, the one bedroom obviously went to my mother. That means there's no other bedrooms, right? So what we did was we had a bunk bed, and the bunk bed was in the dining area off the kitchen. So this bed was actually too big for the dining area. So depending on which way you slept, either your head was in the kitchen area or your feet were in the kitchen area. And we thought it was the most fun thing ever. Like, we didn't think it was a problem because our mother didn't have a victim mindset. We just thought it was part of the fun. So we didn't think, oh my God, we're poor. Like, look at these rich people. They're so much smarter than us because they have access to things. We just thought it was the cost of just being alive and having fun. I was closer to the refrigerator, so, good for me. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying is that if they're going to say it's a problem, that they don't have access to their own study space, listen, it's nice to have your own bedroom. you know, paint it just the way you want with your little stuffed toys and things and places. I get that. But that's a luxury. That's not a necessity. And that's no excuse at all to have a poor mindset and to think, I'm going to stay poor, or my kids are going to stay poor because they don't have their own bedroom. That's ridiculous. Let's move on. That's no excuse. Number two, 14% don't have access to a computer. Now, this is a problem. It could be. So I live in Nevada. It's probably the worst state in the United States for education. And as far as I know, if you tell the school that you don't have a computer, they will give you a Chromebook. I don't know anybody who doesn't have one. So let's just say that Nevada in one area is doing well, let's say. I mean, we suck. We're like 50th out of 50 in terms of education. So I can't imagine anybody being much worse than us, or worse at all, where we're horrible. But let's just say kids don't get computers. That is an issue, that's a problem. So let's just, I can give up on that one, that's a problem. Number three, 9% don't have access to the internet. Okay, that's a problem too, absolutely, of course, during the pandemic and the lockdown, I get it. But here's the thing, there are places that do have free Wi-Fi. Now, I'm thinking about what my mother would do. Let's say if my sister was 6 and I was 8 years old, going back then. We probably would have went down to the local coffee shop and we would have made a day of it because they have free Wi-Fi over there and we get to people watch and we get to do our studies, and then we would get to have more parental involvement, right? We get to hang out with our mother all day, which we would have thought it was a fun thing. Can everybody do this? No, but there are ways around it. There is free Wi-Fi around, you can do it. Here's the other thing that I think my mother would have done. She would have gotten the hard copy for the lessons. You know, there's plenty of worksheets. She easily would have called the school and told the teachers, mail the information to us. Mail it. And if they said no, my mother would have gone down to the teachers. She would have knocked on their door and said, give me the information that my kids need to learn. And how do I know this? Let's just say, again, I'll use a personal story here. Between kindergarten and 3rd grade, I missed an average of 80 days of school a year. And I did really well in school, but I didn't go to school very often. I did school at home most of the time. You know, and a lot of that time I was in the hospital, so I did a lot of homework from my hospital bed. And I remember going through all those worksheets with my mother and father. So I'm not buying into this, that it's a problem with this Wi-Fi either. Like, these problems can be solved. There are hard copies. Like, it's not like learning only started when computers were invented. Let's get past that. And if it's still a problem, I get it, it's a problem, but you know what? We can't just let it walk over you and you're gonna destroy your education or destroy your kids' education. You're gonna have to do something about it. So number 4, no money for tutors or individualized attention. Right, but the lockdown didn't cause that. So that problem was always there, and the problem won't go away. There's always somebody richer who can hire somebody. Right, I want to be a better guitar player. There's probably somebody who could hire the greatest guitar player in the world. That's just the way life is. So there's really no reason to complain about this. So let's talk about, again, which is something I really love. It's the inconvenient truth. The inconvenient truth is this, is that there are technology problems with the poor. Absolutely, that's a given. But that's not the main problem here. The main problem is with the parents. Let me say that again. The main problem is with the parents, because when you take the children out of school, the parents from the higher socioeconomic areas are being better parents. The teachers aren't making up, they're not closing the gap. Before, a lot of the parents from the poor areas, they let the teachers try to make up the whole difference for them, because they're not really involved with their children that much. And I know that sounds horrible. Listen, I'm a liberal, and it's the last thing I want to say. But, you know, it's so obvious, and the numbers are they're there to back it up. And at some point, we have to actually do things that are going to help people. So let's talk about Buddhism for a second out of nowhere. Buddhism has a concept that I really like because, number one, I totally believe it and it's true. And it also wakes people up because it has a really interesting name. It's called idiot compassion. And what is idiot compassion? It means basically too much empathy and not enough empowerment. It means trying to make people feel better instead of making people do better. It talks about enabling people. Here's an example. If you know that somebody's an alcoholic or heroin addict and they don't have any money and they're asking you for money, what do you think the right thing is to do? It's not empathetic and compassionate to give them money. They're going to kill themselves. All they're going to do is get drunk or get high or do something. That's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is give them the tough medicine, which is to actually help them and not buy drugs for them, essentially, right? So that's what I'm talking about here. So we really have to talk about the truth. And here are some of the truths that we need to consider in this subject. Number one, the lockdown, it should maximize the interaction between family members, and it should increase parental involvement, which is actually just as important or more important than going to a good school. Because if you give me a child who's treated poorly at home, who goes to a good school, up against a child who goes to not such a great school but has amazing parents, I'm going to say the kid who comes from the family who loves them and is involved and honors them and supports them is going to be much better off. But is it true? Did the lockdown cause more parental involvement? Did it cause more interaction between parents and child? Well, the answer to that is yes and no. Because on the lower socioeconomic scale, it did not. In the richer part of the socioeconomic scale, it did. So is this a technology problem or is it a priorities problem? I don't know. Let's see what the numbers say. So rich people are twice as likely to read to their kids or to read with their children. And I'm not talking off of a computer screen. I'm talking books. Now, I don't understand this. If you're on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, why can't you read with your children? I don't understand that, but I'm not here to judge. But it's obvious that reading is very important. And it's not just reading of the words. It's that connection. And listen, even if you don't have a book, I remember growing up and I had great aunts and uncles that would tell me stories. That was even better because then they would say, tell me a story. And it would create a lot of imagination. You know, these things are like, I don't know if they're lost arts, but I noticed that they're not lost arts with children who do well because their parents are actually involved. Rich families, 25% more likely to participate in physical activities with their children. Again, your kids are home all day. You can't go out and have a catch. You can't go and play a little basketball. You can't have a push-up contest. I used to have push-up contests with my uncles all the time, and I lost all the time, but that's okay. I used to go running with my uncle sometimes. Like, it's amazing to me. Like, I don't understand this. It's free. Go to the park with your kid. Like, it's free, okay? Again, rich parents, they're half as likely to let their kids play video games. Again, half as likely. They don't play video games that often. And here's something that's interesting. Listen, I don't even know the name that because I don't have anything like that. But PlayStation, I think it's called an Xbox, they cost $500. If you're poor and you're spending $500 so your kid could rot their brain playing video games, I don't understand it. You know, and typically, we'll talk about this later, but who do you think has the biggest percentage of iPhone users? It's not rich kids, it's poor kids. Poor kids, about 84% of poor kids have smartphones. 71% of rich kids have smartphones. Why is this? It's because the parents know. They understand the information. That the CEOs from Silicon Valley, the ones who invented all this technology, including Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all these, you know, like wizards and these incredible brainiacs, They all say that their children do not have smartphones. They don't give it to their own kids. They don't want their kids with their head in a computer all day either. They want them to socialize with human beings. Again, this is not a technology problem. This is a parental problem. Continuing on. Rich families, they're half as likely to let their kids watch TV. Again, if you're poor, why, in your home, why are you letting your kids watch meaningless TV? Again, rotting their brains, not helping them for the future. Rich families, twice as likely to make their kids watch educational or read educational programming. There you go. So instead of sitting, having some kid play for 6-8 hours a day on Minecraft, why don't we actually teach them something that's actually important? Again, you can't blame the lockdown for this. This is just straight parenting stuff here. It's just plain and obvious. So again, let's go over this real quick to sum it up. Yes, there's some technology problems. Yes, there's been more of a gap between the rich and poor in terms of learning. And yes, some of it is through technology. Absolutely. But it's more of a parenting problem. We need to have much, much better parenting. We need to have parents who are involved. Actually, at the agency that I'm at, we started to work with this other company, and we tried to get a bunch of people that look from the low socioeconomic to join this group, and I think it was this robotics group, and they wanted to do it for free. This was a free group, a free class, Saturday at 1 o'clock. You know who showed up? The therapists. Not one parent, and of course then not one child. So let me finish with this. Again, these children don't need smartphones. They don't need PlayStations and Xboxes to rot their brain, and they're not learning how to develop social connections. They really need to learn how money works, in a sense. They don't need to have their parents go, oh my God, we don't have money and we're poor. No, but they need to know the difference between a liability and an asset. They need to know how to invest, and the number one investment is to invest in yourself and your education. Look at it like this. If you're from a poor area or a socioeconomic background that's disadvantaged, and let's say you are legitimately disadvantaged, how did you come up with $500 for an Xbox and another $500 for a smartphone for like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid? Let's try something different. This is what we can do. Take that $1,000. When they're 5 years old, going into kindergarten, put it into an account that actually can get them some money. Invest it somewhere. Invest it in the stock market. By the time they graduate high school, they're going to have a pretty good amount of money to go to college. Instead, if you don't do that, you're not going to have any money, and then you're going to say, oh my God, the poor always stays poor. And listen, I know that there's a lot of systemic issues out there that can't be changed overnight, and you're not going to change it, and I'm not going to change it. But some of this is very, very changeable. If you want to rise above, we have to take a look at the inconvenient truth and do the right thing, not the easy thing. So my name is Joe Peroni. I hope you found this show valuable to you, and hopefully you will subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.